Okay, this is an example of product costing where absorption costing method has been compared with activity-based costing method. So this is the information that has been given to us. So it's about White and Decker Limited, which manufactures two types of concrete drilling machines. So one is standard, the other is deluxe. So these are the two versions. We have also been told that the standard version is made in large batches, whereas the deluxe is made in small batches. Each new batch requires machinery to be set up, that is, it needs to be reconfigured. Each product requires the incorporation of a complex special part. The standard requires one of these, whereas the deluxe requires 4 of them. So we can see here 1 for standard and 4 for deluxe. The company has always used absorption costing despite major investment in automation in the last few years. It is feasible to implement ABC at the company, and the following overhead analysis is provided. Now that's the analysis that we have got here, and we have this information. So these two sets of information we have, and we will see whether from all this information we can carry out activity-based costing or not. The company currently sells all that it produces, so we can assume that whatever it is producing, it is also being sold. However, the managing director believes that for the immediate future, the company will have to work within current resources. Now, what we have been asked to do, calculate the profit per unit and the return on sales for these both versions of the product, standard and deluxe products. So first we should use absorption costing, where direct labor hours are to be used for working out our overhead absorption rate. And secondly, we should work out product cost using activity-based costing, that is ABC method. So once we have done that, then we have been asked to work out product profitability in A, and then identify the sales policy that the company should follow if ABC was implemented. So we work out for both absorption costing as well as for ABC, and if it is ABC, then what sort of production policy should be implemented. So of course that will depend on which product seems to be more profitable, as we have been given this information that the main objective is to maximize its profits. So of course the product which is more profitable needs to be produced and sold more. So now let us look at how this question we are going to solve. So first we have been asked to do absorption costing. So we will focus on all the information that is needed for working out absorption costing and thus work out the product cost. So we know that in order to do absorption costing, we need to work out overhead absorption rate, that is OAR. And we know from our previous knowledge that this is total overheads. So we need to know total overheads figure for the accounting period that is being planned. So what will be the total overheads in that period? And also we need to know the number of total direct labor hours for that period. If it is labor intensive, the norm is that we use labor hours. If it is machine intensive, then the norm is to use machine hours instead. In this case, we have been told that we need to use labor hours. So that's why we have put here number of total direct labor hours. Now we need to have these two figures, and if these are not directly given in the question, we need to work out what is the total overheads for the period and what is the number of total labor hours. So once we know these two figures, we can work out our overhead absorption rate and then work out our product cost. So first, overheads. Now these overheads have been given in these categories: setup costs overhead, special part handling costs overhead, customer invoicing costs, material handling costs, and other overheads. So we have 5 categories of overheads, but we need total overheads figure. So we just total them. Now these are in pounds. So we have total overheads figure of 333,200 pounds. So we have this total overhead figure. So for absorption costing, we don't need these activity-based different categories of costs. We rather need one total overheads figure. So we total them and we get our total overheads figure. Next, we need to know number of total labor hours. So the direct labor hours we need to work out the total figure. Now we have two products. So the total labor hours required for this product plus the total labor hours required for the second product, that will give us the final total hours figure. So how we worked it out? We know that standard version requires 2 labor hours. And how many we have to produce? 12,000 units. So if each unit needs 2 hours, 12,000 units would need 12,000 times 2, so 24,000 labor hours are needed in order to produce 12,000 units of standard. Similarly, we are told that 2.5 labor hours are needed for 1 unit of deluxe. So if 12,000 units are to be produced, we need 2.5 times 12,000, 30,000 labor hours. So 30,000 for deluxe and 24,000 for standard. If we add them, that means altogether for this whole accounting period for which we are planning, we will be needing 54,000 hours, labor hours. So now we have got the two figures, total overheads and total number of direct labor hours. So in order to work out overhead absorption rate, this divided by this, we get 6.17 pound per direct labor hour. Now this is our overhead absorption rate. That would mean that if standard uses 1 labor hour, we should give it 6.17 pound of overhead. If it uses 2 labor hour, then twice that. So we just multiply this by the number of hours that product is using. So we move on. For product cost calculation, first the prime cost, so labor, direct labor and direct material cost. So we know that 16 pound is the direct labor cost for standard and 20 pound is the cost for deluxe. And how we worked it out? We have used the labor hours required by standard. We just multiplied by the rate per hour, and we have already been given this in the question that what is the labor rate per hour, and we already know that it uses 2 hours, so we were given 8 pound per labor hour. So 8 times 2, it will make it 16 pound. Similarly, this 2.5 times 8 pound will make it 20 pound. Material, we were told that it's 22 pound for standard and 32 pound for deluxe, and that is given in the question. If it was not directly given, we would have worked it out that how much material is needed for standard and how much material is needed for deluxe. Now overheads, all we are doing is we have already worked out our overhead absorption rate, 6.17 pound per labor hour. So 6.17 times 2, that will give us 12.34, and similarly 6.17 times 2.5 will give us 15.43. So we add them and total cost per unit is 50 pound and 34 pence, and for this deluxe it is 67 pound and 43 pence. So now that's the per unit cost for standard, and that is the per unit cost for deluxe. Now profitability analysis, all it means that if you sell 1 unit, what will be the profit? So selling price we are given 65 pound for standard and 87 pound for deluxe. Total cost we have already worked out. For 1 unit is 50.34. So this minus this, selling price minus cost per unit. So profit each unit will generate will be 14.66, and by same token we will get 19.57 profit figure from deluxe. So if we do return on sale in percentage, that is this profit divided by the selling price, we will, and times it by 100, we will get 22.55% from standard and 22.50 for deluxe. So we can conclude that there is almost no difference in terms of profitability of the two products, so we can manufacture both in equal proportion. So if we are manufacturing 100 of these, we can manufacture 100 of these. Now we have completed the profitability analysis on the basis of product cost that we worked out using absorption costing method. Now let us do the same after we work out the product cost using activity based costing. Now before we work out, it is important that we should keep in mind the following steps that we normally use for our activity based costing questions. So step 1 is look at the question and try to identify what are the cost pools. Cost pool is just a name given to different categories of overhead costs. So for example, in that table we saw that we had 5 different categories of costs. So those categories of costs, overhead costs, are called cost pools. And cost drivers. So cost driver is just the activity which is driving those costs. So what sort of activity increases these costs, and if you decrease that activity, that category of cost will also decrease. So linking that category of cost with the activity which is driving it, that is what we need to identify from the given question. Then we work out driver volumes. That is simply that what is the level of activity. So how many units of that activity they are taking place. So we need to work out driver volumes. Then once we know driver volumes and we know the total cost in that particular activity, so from that we work out driver rate. And using that driver rate we work out our overheads allocation, that is how much should go to this product and how much should go to the other product. And you get product cost calculation based on this allocation. So it will be easier to understand these steps once we look at this question. Alright, so here is the same question again, now using activity based costing. So step 1, just as I said, we need to identify cost pools and cost drivers. So these are our cost pools, that is, these are the different categories of overhead costs. And we, in this question, we identified 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 5 different types of overhead costs were given. And what are the cost drivers? So that is also given in the question, that it's the setups, number of setups which will drive the setup costs. It's the number of special parts which will drive the special part handling costs. Number of invoices is responsible for increasing or decreasing customer invoicing costs. Similarly, material handling costs are related to number of batches. So more the number of batches, more will be the material handling costs. And other overheads which are shared and can't be categorized, So those are driven by labor costs. So more labor, more will be those costs. So for example, it can be insurance, or it can be usage of electricity. So all that will depend on labor hours. So more the labor hours, more will be those costs. So step 2, calculate driver volumes. Now we want to do this calculation of driver volume, that for each activity how much is the driver, that is the cost driver, its amount we are trying to work out. So one is number of setups. So we want to know how many setups for standard and how many setups in total are required for deluxe, and what is the total for both the products. So we get it here. So how we worked it out, we know that number of setups per batch. Now that is given in the question, that standard requires 1 setups per batch, while deluxe requires 3 setups per batch. Now, so we need to work out how many batches are needed for standard and how many batches are needed for deluxe. Now we know that batches depend on sales. So we have been given this in the question, that 12,000 units are to be sold for standard and 12,000 of deluxe are to be sold. So we know that this is in 1,000. So one batch is 1,000, while deluxe one batch is just 50 units. So we will need 12 batches in order to produce 12,000, because one batch is 1,000. So 12 batches will make it 12,000 units which are required. Here one batch is 50, so we will need 240 number of batches. So 240 times 50 will make it 12,000. So from this we can see that total number of setups, that will be, because per batch we have 1 setup. So if there are 12 batches, we will also need 12 setups. Here we have been told that number of setups per batch are 3. So if there are 240 batches, 240 times 3, we will need 720 setups. And in total that will be 12 plus 720, 732. So what we have done here, we have worked out what is the number of setups for each product and total as a whole as well. So 12 number of setups for standard and 720 setups for deluxe, altogether 732 setups. Now intuitively we can see from here that these setup related costs, these costs should go to the 2 products in the same proportion. 12 out of 732 should go to standard, and 720 by 732 should go to deluxe, but that we will do later on. Now let us look at the second one. Special handling cost depends on number of special parts. So we work out that how many are needed. So we know that number of special parts per unit for standard is 1 and for deluxe it is 4. So if 12,000 units are to be produced and sold, it will need 12,000 parts. Each unit needs 4 parts. So altogether it will need 12,000 times 4, 48,000. And if we add these two, that will be 60,000. So all in all we need 60,000 special parts. Now number of invoices, because that is linked with invoicing costs, customer invoicing costs, that depends on number of invoices. So we work out what are the total number of invoices for standard and for deluxe, and then total. So number of invoices issued for standard is 50 given in question, and number of invoices issued for deluxe 240. That again is given in the question. And if you add them, 50 plus 240, it's 290 in total. Now number of batches we have already worked out above here. So number of batches for standard it is 12, and number of batches for deluxe is 240. So altogether 252. Labor hours we have already worked out in our absorption costing part of the question. So we know that 2 hours per unit needed for standard one, while 2.5 hours are needed for this deluxe version. Now we also know that annual sales are 12,000, so 12,000 times 2, 24,000, 2.5 times 12,000, 30,000. And if you add them, 54,000 total labor hours are needed. Now we have worked out our driver volumes here. So how much each cost driver in total is required for this product and how much of that is required for this, and then total of the two. So that is we have done in this step. Now calculate driver volumes. So for that we again bring those costs here. So that's given in the question. So all these costs, and also on what basis they are to be allocated. So that's cost driver. Now this much is given in the question. So using the same table, all we are doing is that we work out our driver volume, that is how many number of setups are there. So 732 setups are there. So 73,200 divided by 732, that would mean 100 pound per setup. Similarly we do this for each one. So that category is 60,000 special part handling cost, and number of special parts we worked out, the total was 60,000. So if you look here, we had worked out that is 60,000, the grand total for the two. So all we do is 60,000 pound divided by 60,000 volume, 1 pound. So that means each special part would require 1 pound to be allocated, and we do it for all the other as well using the same, that this one divided by the volume, and we get the driver rate. Now we have done driver rates. Now we move to overhead allocation using these driver rates. So again all the 5 types, those are here. We have just worked out their driver rates, so we start with that column. Driver rate, 100 pound per setup cost, 1 pound per special handling, so special part, 100 pound for each invoice. So these we worked out on previous step. Now volume used, how much volume is used of standard and how much volume is used of deluxe. So we will multiply this volume by the rate. So for standard it is 12,000, 12 times 100, and for deluxe it is 720 times 100, 72,000, and altogether it is 73,200. That was given to us, 73,200. So we have allocated it to standard 1200 and 72,000 to deluxe using our driver rates, which we worked out in our previous step. All we did, this driver rate times the volume for standard of that activity and the volume for deluxe of that activity. Similarly we do it for our other these different cost pools, and using their driver rates we multiply them by the volumes and we get the allocations. Now we total these overheads now. So all these allocated ones, we total them, and we total this as well. So altogether this is 333,2000. If you remember from our absorption costing question, that was the total that we got, total overhead. But in that case we just use that figure, but here we have allocated it to the two products on the basis of different activities which are used by those two products. In absorption costing, we didn't do that. Here we have first allocated them on the basis of the product which is using more of these activities is getting more of that cost. And then we added all of them, so we get these two figures. Now we bring the annual sales, that is how many units have been produced. So this total overhead divided by the sales figure or the production figure. So we get 5.77 pound for standard and 22 pound for deluxe. So this is our per unit product cost for overhead allocation. Now to work out the full product cost, we need to first do the prime cost, and that will be same as in our previous question. In all these methods, only the overhead allocation method is different. Otherwise, the prime cost remains same. So we use the same figures as we used in our absorption costing, 16 pound and 20 pound for labor, for material 22 pound and 32 pound, but for overheads we use these two figures. And we add them and we get 43.77 pound for standard and 74 pound for deluxe. Now if we again do our profitability analysis, selling price minus this product cost, it is 21.23 pound for standard, and selling price minus this product cost for deluxe gives us 13 pound profit per unit for deluxe. So if we do return on sale, that is selling price, the profit divided by selling price times 100, so we get 32.67% for standard and 14.94% for deluxe. Now you see in absorption costing both were almost same, so therefore there was not any difference whether you produce that one or that one, because they both were same. So you were ready to produce equal quantity of both. But here this is giving you almost double the profit in terms of return on sales as compared to deluxe. So naturally, if preference is to be given, then you would like to produce these more than deluxe. Of course, this will also be determined by demand, whether can you produce and sell more of standard. But if the opportunity is there, you would like to do more marketing on standard as compared to deluxe, because that is more profitable to produce and sell. So we have seen how to work out absorption costing based product cost and how to work out same product cost using activity based costing method. And here we also realize that the profitability in terms of decision making can be different if we use different methods, and we can arrive at entirely different decisions if we use different costing methods.